Hello, Wellness Warriors. My name is Dr. Sean Medlin, your leader, your captain, moving us forward, moving Grand Rapids forward in health and wellness. So again, our whole mission statement is to maximize our health potential to live up to our fullest. That's why we're going to bring you this interview today. I'm really excited to be interviewing Dr. Royer. He is the founder and the creator of NeruoPeak Pro. We're going to find out what that is, what his research has led us to increase our health and wellness in Grand Rapids. And it's all about the brain-body connection. This is what we teach on every day. That's why our office and Dr. Royer's profession and focus is so congruent. And that's why we're connecting with him today. And we're going to find out a little bit more about him, his philosophy, and what they do. So let's say hi to Dr. Royer real quick. Hello, Grand Rapids. Dr. Sean Medlin here with the Wellness Warriors. I am super excited to bring to you Dr. Royer. He is the creator of NeruoPeak Pro. He is an expert on the brain-body connection, and we are super blessed to have him on an interview with us. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Dr. Royer. Say hello, Dr. Royer.
Hey, Sean, and hey, group out there. Excited to be on today and talk to you about the brain and the body and how we make that stronger.
Fantastic. So before we get started with the hard-hitting questions here, let's talk a little bit about our love for Grand Rapids. So we're both local here in Grand Rapids, and just real quick, what are your favorite hobbies and activities here in GR?
Oh, man, I love getting out to the lake. That's one of the favorite things. We got a new dog last year, and he's very active. So a lot of times right after work, we just drive on out to the lake and hike over the dunes. And I mean, there's just nothing like it. I mean, you can have this in your backyard. Downtown, just watching it come alive, going to the market downtown, all the different restaurants. I mean, it's awesome. Love going to Millennium Park, doing a lot of walking, running, bike riding over there. Yeah, all the great outdoor activities. It's awesome.
That's fantastic. I hear you. What kind of dog did you just get?
We got a Hungarian Vizsla, which is a very active dog. If you're not active, don't get this dog. But my kids, they all run. They're all runners, and we're out a lot. So great dog. We had Goldens for 26 years, and we decided to switch over. And yeah, he's been really fun. Cooper. His name's Cooper.
Cooper, that's fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, I'd love to hear the behind-the-scenes story behind how you started NeruoPeak Pro and the motivation and the why behind it.
Yeah. So I've been in the field of neuroscience for 25 years. Moved to Grand Rapids area in 1994 to do a one-year internship for my doctoral degree at Pine Rest. And so plan was, I had family in the area. My wife's family was planning to be here for a year. And then we had come from Atlanta. I grew up in the South. So it's like, we'll be here for a year and then, move back down south. Well, that was 1994 and it's 2018. So in the process, we've had 4 kids and raised them all here. And what ended up happening was after my first year, it was the early years at DeVos Children's Hospital. And back then, it wasn't as large as it is now, and just had a very few number of specialty clinics in the Children's Hospital: oncology, respiratory, GI, neurology. But as the Children's Hospital was developing, they realized that it's really next to impossible to have a children's hospital without a behavioral health arm. About 60 to 65% of kids, when they go into the hospital setting, actually have some type of psychological or behavioral overlay in most children's hospital settings. So you have to have some behavioral specialists, some way to consult with them. So they reach out to Pine Rest. All my neuropsych work is in child and adolescent neuropsych testing. So initially it was a small contract with Pine Rest to provide behavioral health services, which I did as part of my internship. But then that grew from 200 kids that year to when I left there in 2002, we were seeing close to 6,000 kids from all over the Midwest through the Children's Hospital. So now DeVos has a massive behavioral health footprint, and that department involves all kinds of people who service all these specialty clinics. So when a brain tumor doc has a problem with a patient that's wondering how's that affecting their neuropsych functioning, they need somebody they can get a hold of right away that says, this is what's going on with that child's brain. Or somebody in the GI group, the child's having stomach problems. How do we figure out, is this psychological, is this emotional, is this physiological, before we do all these procedures? So that's really how I started here in Grand Rapids. And it was out of that work that, of literally seeing thousands and thousands of kids and adolescents, that I started to realize that there were some real kind of missing pieces to behavioral health. And that really first for me started in the area of diagnostics, is that many times people get a diagnosis of something just based on behaviors, but nobody really looks at their brain, and they're just looking at behaviors. And the big place that this happens is in this rare disorder called ADHD that very few people have heard of. Just kidding. There's about 15 million people out there with ADHD. But in the Children's Hospital setting, we would see these kids that were kind of the worst of the worst come to us after they'd been through the system for a while. And they'd come to us and we'd go to assess them and find out this child doesn't even have ADHD. And they've been treated for ADHD for 7 years. You know, or this child has this disorder, but really that isn't what's going on. They're really depressed or they're anxious. And so I really started to develop a passion to understand why people experience different behaviors, emotions, physiological things, and to really drive the medical community to say, look at the brain before you give a diagnosis. Don't just give it based on behaviors. What we found out over the years is close to 65 to 70% of these individuals diagnosed with ADHD don't even have ADHD. They have something else, underlying sleep problem or stress, anxiety, depression, learning disability. And that was really the impetus for forming in the early 2000s NeruoCore, which is the NeruoCore Brain Performance Center that exists that see about 50,000 visits a year. And then the last few years really developed a specialty arm called NeruoPeak Pro, which is now helping people that want to just optimize their health and want to optimize their focus, their performance. And so Peak Pro does a lot of that work, but still with the same underlying principle. Just don't just look at your behaviors, look at your brain. If you're not sleeping well, the answer just isn't an Ambien. It's, why am I not sleeping well? Could it be that that sleeping problem is actually a warning light for a deeper problem in my autonomic nervous system that if I don't address now, it's going to come out as a cardiovascular problem, as an endocrine problem, as a cognitive problem later in life. And I need to see that sleep problem as a flashing red light to say, hey, check why I'm not sleeping. Don't just cover it with a medicine. So long answer, but that's kind of the development of kind of why I'm sitting here doing NeruoPeak Pro today. But it all started really back at the Children's Hospital.
That's phenomenal, Dr. Royer. That speaks to my heart truly, because you're literally talking about a paradigm shift in the belief system where health comes from, right? Instead of health coming from the outside in, medication, let's diagnose the symptom, to the body is supposed to function properly. Let's figure out what's causing this in the first place. That can literally shift the focus of healthcare. So I love that you're focusing on the brain. Tell me a little bit more about how the brain communicates with the body and why you focus on that.
Yeah. So I think it's very important for us to understand a basic principle is that our entire body works off of electrical current. Okay, my muscles work off of electricity. Okay, the neurons in my brain use neurotransmitters to communicate electrical signals. My heart is this electrical device that needs electricity to it to make it run. And all these chemical changes that happen inside my body are all about electrical current. Okay, so I like in what we do that we're like a master electricians of the brain and body. Okay, because we understand all these electrical currents and how they work, and be able to analyze them and then shift them appropriately. So first of all, we work off of electricity. Okay, we need electricity, and that electricity needs to be balanced. So two things about electricity. One is, which is really cool, is we're making electrical current. So unlike your iPhone that you plug in and charge it at night and you watch the battery level change as you go throughout the day, your body doesn't plug in. Like, you don't just plug in your brain to an outlet. You actually, inside of you is this masterful power plant that makes electrical current. Okay, and so there's a lot of things we need, basic elements for this, and food is super important, right, to make the electrical current. Good nutrition determines what kind of power I'm going to make. I'm either going to make really dirty electricity or very clean electricity. I can live off of Big Macs, but it's not very good electrical current I can make, right? So that's why, food is super important. Probably more important than that is the hydration. Okay, that's super important because electrical current, you need good hydration. We need good sleep because since we're a continuous electrical being, this electrical system needs to be rejuvenated. Sleep is super important. And then the most important thing would be oxygen. Okay, so most of our energy that we make, about 70% of it actually comes from oxygen. And so we need to be breathing well, turning that oxygen combined with these other elements into electrical current. So that's the making. The second thing is we manage electrical current. So I don't want to use it all at once, because then I'd be like eating continuously and all these different things. So my body has to have this masterful system that it knows how to regulate the electrical current at different speeds based on different needs. Mm-hmm. And so we have this wonderful regulation within something called our nervous system. And particular branch of the nervous system is called our autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is amazing. It's this masterful thermostat that's constantly interacting with the environment and deciding how much electrical current I need at any given moment in time. And so this autonomic nervous system has two extremes. It has a very, very fast extreme, which we all know of as fight, flight, fright. So that's when I'm really anxious and I'm in, go mode. To this, and that's called sympathetic. To this other extreme, which is called parasympathetic, which is rest, recover, and renew. Okay. We also digest food in this state. So our autonomic nervous system is constantly looking at the environment and deciding, Tim, what do I need right now? What do you need right now? Do you need to go super, super fast? If not, let's save that electricity for later. You need to go really, really slow so we can recover because we've been under a lot of stress. Going to parasympathetic. But I'm constantly taking in cues from my environment to decide at what speed I should go. And the way I take that in is through my senses. And my 5 senses allow me to integrate and interface with my environment to decide what I'm going to do in any given situation. One last thing, as a human, I can override those senses with my frontal lobe and put myself in these states, even though the environment may not be congruent with that. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing, because we get ourselves going super fast because of the what ifs. What if this happens? What about this? What about what happened to me in the past? And I get my autonomic nervous system going so fast all the time that it then starts to exhibit all these problems throughout my body. And we work on that a lot. How do we get the autonomic nervous system in balance?
So have you heard what they say the number one fear above dying is?
Well,
Public speaking.
Public speaking. Yeah.
Yep. And so that's an autonomic response, right? Exactly like you're talking about, where there's no fear, there's no imminent danger, but it's all worked up in our frontal lobe, like you're speaking of.
Yeah. And what happens is we get a dry mouth, okay, which is a sympathetic response, because when I'm going fast, my body can't digest food. So what it does is it shuts down all the digestive mechanisms, and one of those is making saliva. So the reason we get a dry mouth when we get up in front of people or we're in a stressful situation, my body says, well, you're going way fast right now. There's no reason for us to waste energy of making saliva. Then later in the day, we go home and we crash and we find ourselves drooling on the pillow. Like, well, why did I do that? Because my body needed to recover, so it shifted way into parasympathetic and maybe even overproduce some of these digestive responses. And a lot of times problems in our weight and our metabolism come from this autonomic nervous system getting out of balance because it's not congruent with what I'm experiencing. There's a great book by Dr. Sapolsky at Stanford called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Okay.
I'm writing that down.
And it talks a lot about this whole autonomic nervous system getting out of balance. And if we really were congruent with our environment, we have about only a quarter of the stress-related illness that we experience in our culture. But it's that frontal lobe that gets out of balance.
So you're saying that the stress is having a direct impact on the nervous system?
Absolutely. And that can be real or perceived stress, stress that we create. You know, I can sit here and talk to you and all of a sudden start thinking about my 4 kids and they're all in college or graduate school. And, you know, I can start to add up all these things in my head that are going on, or a sick family member or a travel schedule. And the next thing I know, I'm in a very comfortable state here in my office. But now my frontal lobe has got me going super fast, making massive demands on my nervous system, releasing adrenaline, and then ultimately causing problems for my body over time if I stay in that state, all because of mentally I've got myself going faster than I need to be going.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that mental stress can manifest in physical attributes and physical symptoms.
Yeah.
So let's get your take on medication and medicine's impact on both the brain and the body.
Yeah. So the way I like to look at medicine, and a lot of my really good friends are physicians, do a lot of collaborative work together. So right out of the chute, I'm not opposed to medicine. Okay, medicine's a great thing. What we've been able to do with using chemicals to adjust the electrical current in our bodies and consequent symptoms of the electrical current being out of balance is really amazing. But it's also not very complex. Okay, most medicines either drive me faster, which is a sympathetic response, or drive me slower, which is a parasympathetic response. There's nothing super mystical or magical about this. They're drivers of the autonomic nervous system. So the problems that I have with that is that change in symptomology actually keeping me from addressing an underlying problem? So just because I can lower my blood pressure with medicine, is that a really good thing if there's other stress-related things going on in my body that's going to contribute to dementia, type 2 diabetes, weight gain, that I'm not addressing just because I'm covering it, or what I like to call duct tape medicine? It's like I'm kind of putting duct tape over a warning light. Not that we shouldn't address that high blood pressure at one level, but we need to address it at a deeper level. Okay. Second is it's very rare that anybody has an exit strategy for these meds. So I'd like to challenge your listeners out there is next time you go into your doctor's office with your 8-year-old child who's on ADHD meds, say, hey, by the way, what's the exit strategy for Johnny here? And unfortunately, it's going to be like, there really isn't an exit strategy. Johnny's supposed to take a class 2 controlled substance the rest of his life. And what that really does is it doesn't address the power of the brain and what it can do. And it can learn to focus. If it can learn physics, it can learn to focus. And so we kind of shortchange our brain when we just assume, well, this is the answer for the rest of the life, for especially a developing brain. Mm-hmm. And then third is I see medicine more as a short-term kind of Band-Aid. where we need to be addressing the long-term problems. So a good example is if I fell and I broke my leg and it was very traumatic, I want an ambulance to come and get me. Okay, so call 911. I've got this very bad break, and the ambulance runs me to the hospital. Okay, the sole purpose of that ambulance is to help me in the short term to get to the hospital. But ultimately, I want to get to the operating room, and I want them to fix this very bad break in my brain. So the ambulance is good for getting me there. But if in 6 weeks I'm still in the ambulance isn't really addressing my issues. And if 6 years later I'm still driving around town in this ambulance, the ambulance has actually become a bad thing for me. So short term, maybe on some meds. I've seen in many situations where it's totally unnecessary. But if we are going to go the med route, it's not intended to be a long-term solution. We need to figure out, why is the autonomic nervous system out of balance? And don't just address the behaviors, address the brain and how it's driving those behaviors.
Man, you are this is fantastic. I am absolutely loving this conversation because, first of all, in our office, every single day we teach that we have nothing against medicine. We believe we are in an overprescribed state and world, and there's a time and place, but we need to do it naturally and holistically first. We need to look at our lifestyles. Mm-hmm. Number two, I think what was worth the price of admission is for these people, for our group, for the community to go out and ask their primary what the exit strategy is. Yeah. Let's have a plan. That's fantastic. And second of all, the difference between acute and chronic care. That's very big, because the medical paradigm is for an acute care situation, not a lifestyle. And so, all absolutely amazing points. What are some alternatives to medicine in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's good to look at it from two things. One is, good diagnostics are super helpful for giving you a roadmap for what it is you need to work on, right? Like, I get it, I need to take a trip from point A to point B. But if I don't know what point B is, I'm just going to be driving around all over the place, you know, and I need to know where I'm going, and I need a roadmap. So diagnostics, good diagnostics, are roadmaps to help you get someplace. So many times people will be tested for ADHD. I've seen this happen so many times, where people get tested for ADHD. There's good testing that's done, computerized, continuous performance test. And then they're just sent to their doctor and they're started on meds. And then nobody goes back and retests and sees, like, are you doing better? Yeah, mom or the teacher, whoever thinks you're doing better, but are you really doing better on objective measures of attention? You know, we'd use a mobile polysomnograph, which is a sleep study that people can use in their home. So when I see somebody's sleep is off and they're not getting enough deep sleep or enough REM sleep or too many awakenings, I want to do some treatment, but then I want to go back and reassess their sleep and see, is it better? Not just do I sort of feel better, but I want to measure it. When somebody's hormones are off, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, DHEA, these things get out of balance, and I see that in the lab tests that we do. Well, after I do some treatment, I want to go back and use my diagnostics to say, hey, your testosterone's better. That's another whole issue. Is the answer to testosterone isn't just a supplement, it's to figure out, why am I not making testosterone like I should? Okay. Most likely it's because your deep sleep is garbage. Okay. And you need to fix your deep sleep. Another discussion. But we need to use diagnostics efficiently, appropriately, and often to know where we're going. Okay. I'd say that even if you were using meds, you still need to be using good diagnostics. Then the second thing is to address some of the fueling system. So oxygen. We know that we make electrical energy from oxygen. So we do a lot of work with people at retraining how they breathe, how they take in oxygen. We work a lot with people's cardiovascular system. So if I can change your breathing, I can change your heart's resiliency to stress, heart rate variability. So improve, not just measuring heart rate variability, but literally changing the way you breathe. So your heart rate variability or your resiliency to stress doubles or triples. That's awesome. Okay. Another thing is to look at directly at the electrical nervous system. So using an EEG, electroencephalogram, to measure brainwave activity and be able to then teach the brain through the EEG, creating a speedometer for it, and starting to teach the brain how to adjust its speed, whether it's going too slow, teaching it to get a little bit faster, or going too fast, teaching it to get in that middle range, and doing that with the brain's greatest power, which is to learn. The greatest thing that you have in your brain is your brain is able to learn. That's more powerful than anything else that you do. So leveraging that learning potential on the brain to change its speed so that it will stop having these negative symptoms, and not just doing that artificially through chemicals. And so we do a learning process with the brain, which is called EEG feedback, or electrical feedback, for my brain to see how fast I'm going and actually adjust my autonomic nervous system. Those are a few things. There's a lot of other things.
There's a few things, just a couple of them, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
I absolutely love it because we teach this too, separating feeling from function. Not just how you're feeling today, not just if you woke up feeling good or feeling bad, and whether you determine how healthy or sick you are by how you feel, but breaking down the physiology of the body and seeing exactly how you're functioning so we can measure the progress. That's huge. And there's just not enough of that done. So is there some quick tips that you can give the watchers out there? We always talk about morning routine and starting your day off right, that we can maximize our brain and our nervous system in order to wake it up for the day and get going.
Yeah. Well, I think since we have a lot of Grand Rapids listeners on here, I think we need to address our big issue here, which is how light is distributed and how we're taking in light throughout the year. So we have a major shift from the winter solstice to the summer solstice in Michigan. It's huge. It's almost a full sleep cycle that happens in our exposure to light. So in order to optimize our brain and how we start the day, we need to really be aware of light exposure. And I'd strongly recommend that you think about how much natural light you're getting, not just in the winter months, but even the summer months, because it can also become confusing for us when we're now awake till 10:30 at night because the sun hasn't set yet, right, in Michigan. So one of the things that I recommend for people to start off their day is, one, getting outside a lot, getting good light exposure, especially those first few hours in the morning when the sun is at a specific angle that's very good for setting our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle. Another thing is some different types of blue lights that are out there can be super helpful. Our sleep-wake cycle is set by the blue spectrum of light, the same thing that causes animals to migrate. Animals migrate not because of temperature, but more because of their exposure to blue light. They're looking for more blue light as the winter approaches. So our brain kind of does the same thing, and we can get really out of sync with these massive shifts in light. So there's a great light made by Philips called an energy light. I don't get any kickback from that, so you don't have to worry about that. But I've seen people this literally change their lives to use this for 20 minutes in the morning when they wake up. And then there's another set of lights that's called a Balky, that's more of a mobile thing that works great if you're in your car going to work. But I would strongly recommend starting your day with a lot of good light. Really, the number one thing is being very disciplined about your sleep. Sleep is huge. It's the thing that we need to prepare for at night, not just, okay, now it's time to go to sleep, but we need to be thinking about it ahead of time. We need to be pushing towards those 8 hours of sleep. And I can talk about sleep for hours on end, but it is the single most important thing for the human brain and body is making sure we're getting good, high quality sleep.
Thank you for that actionable tip. And we might actually have you back on to tell us about sleep, because
I'd love to.
Yeah, we always talk about living the dream. And that's why this interview has gotten me so excited, because the dream for us stands for diet, rest, exercise, alignment, and state of mind. we get going and rocking and rolling with all of these lifestyle things. We're just optimizing our life and our health. And
That's
so,
great.
yes, I love talking with you today. I really appreciate it. I think our wellness warriors will not only get a lot more information, but action steps as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Royer. Have a fantastic afternoon.
Great. Thanks for your time, Sean. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you for joining us today. That was an outstanding talk with one of the leaders in health and wellness and revolutionizing this movement that we're doing in Grand Rapids, because it's big and we're getting going. We're hitting that tipping point soon where we don't have to be dependent on crutches like drugs and surgery. We can do it naturally because the body was meant to heal from within out, controlled by the brain, talked to it by the spinal cord, out the nerves. And so with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. I'd love to hear your comments, suggestions, any kind of questions that you have. Now, this is something that we do for our wellness warriors. If you want to join our closed Facebook group, we welcome you. It's a safe place where we get to talk about health, healing from the most natural, holistic point of view. You're not going to be judged, and it's just going to be an informational area where you get the most potent to-do steps in order to be the highest potential and expression of yourself that we can be. That's our goal. That's what we want. That's why we're here. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Sean Medlin with Clear Connections Chiropractic. We're connecting you to a better life. Thank you.